Great. Actually, before I start, can I just ask who here has heard of BioArchive? That'll determine how fast I speak. Okay, loads of you, that's great. Um, so, BioArchive is a preprint server for sharing results in the form of papers before you send them to a journal, before they're peer-reviewed. It's important to mention that it comes out of Cold Spring Harbor Lab, so it's essentially an academic project, but Cold Spring Harbor has a long history in scientific communication. So this is part, we have conferences, we have teaching, we have the Maniatis Lab Manual I'm sure loads of you have used, and BioArchive is essentially the latest thing in that endeavor. It was launched in 2013. It's an entirely free non-profit service for sharing of manuscripts in biological sciences, and it very much complements the physics archive that Cornell have hosted and previously Los Alamos for 25 years. And in 2017, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative announced that they were going to be funding BioArchive for the long term and providing us with substantial support. And it was the first big initiative that CZI Science funded. And I think this reflects both Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan's view that they really want to accelerate the pace of research and that science communication is a key part of that. So just to kind of explain the rationale for it, the main reason is really to accelerate communication. Providing these results pre-publication is critically important. It allows people to get feedback on their results, but also for young scientists in particular, who can be treading water for months and years in a job while the paper's being reviewed. This is an opportunity for them to get the information out there. They can put it in grant applications. It can be put in front of hiring committees and make that process faster. And this slide just makes the point. If you look at the blue curve, you'll see that's the time from submission to publication in a journal. The median's about 8 months. The range can be up to 3 years, and that's for one journal. And most people will go through more than one journal for publication. So that's the problem we're trying to solve. And you can see on the left-hand side where BioArchive is, that's 24 to 48 hours, which is a massive time saving for all concerned. So this is just a quick list of what BioArchive provides. Every posted manuscript is date stamped. It's given a digital object identifier so it can be cited. It's indexed in Google Scholar and the new generation of literature discovery tools. You can choose for your article to be new result, confirmatory, or contradictory. Those latter two categories are to incentivize people to start posting studies that address reproducibility that traditionally journals have not been interested in publishing. And another critical difference from a journal is that you can post a revised version at any time, and that's proving very popular. We also provide article metrics for every article. There's a commenting section in every article and links to published versions. So when the paper does appear in a journal, any reader will be alerted to that fact and pushed in that direction. This just shows what the site looks like. You can see the list of papers on the right-hand side, the different subject categories, and synthetic biology is one of those subject categories. This shows an individual paper. You can see the DOI is highlighted and the download link for the author's PDF. The history tab shows the list of previous versions of the paper, so all versions of the paper are always accessible. And the metrics tab shows the number of times the paper's been downloaded, tweeted, appeared in news outlets, etc., etc. And this is just an example of where a paper was subsequently published in Nature, and you can see in bright red underneath the author list there's a link saying this is now in Nature and the link through. After 3 years, we've had we just passed 10,000 papers posted. 30% of those are revised at least once. It's in the region of 50,000 authors. It's a little bit less than that if you do effective deduplication. And if you look at a window of more than 2 years ago, you find that 60% of the papers have appeared in journals subsequently. I mean, that's always, there's going to be some false negatives there because titles and authors change a little bit. But really that's to address the criticism that people said before, which was you'll only get crap. And I think that's a really good example. The fact that this has appeared in good journals indicates that's not the case. And indeed, more than 400 journals have now published papers that first appeared on BioArchive, and that includes Cell, Nature Science, eLife, PNAS, etc. I think the other thing, we've definitely seen some behavioral changes. I think a lot of people were worried at first. They knew this happened in physics. It hadn't happened in biology. We're seeing that change. More and more people are posting preprints. It was really the people in genomics and bioinformatics who led the charge, but we're seeing actually this kind of like sort of sum of sigma plots going on as different communities experience waves of adoption. At the same time, journals have been changing their policies. It used to be the case, I would say 3 or 4 years ago, in which a significant number of journals considered posting on BioArchive prior publication, and so wouldn't allow you to do that. That's now no longer the case for the vast majority of journals in basic biological research. Similarly, funders have been changing their policies. You can now put BioArchive preprints in your NIH BioSketch. Numerous funding bodies have recently come out and encouraged people to put them in grant applications, and this is something that I think you're going to see more and more of, is funding bodies beginning to mandate that authors post on BioArchive when they submit to a journal, and the CZI funded investigators have just been told that, the new generation of them. This is just the adoption curve, which is, we think, is kind of quite exciting and going in the right direction. Just a quick summary of impact. We're seeing BioArchive papers cited. Google Scholar very kindly sums the citations of the journal version and the BioArchive version. There's a moderate amount of commenting on papers, 10%. That may seem low until you compare it to a journal where no one comments. We're also seeing a number of blogs springing up to discuss papers. Actually, the American Society for Microbiology yesterday launched a new service in which they're going to be curating preprints in microbiology, which I think is really exciting. We've been encouraging them to do that, and they're really leading the charge in that respect. We hear, it's unquantifiable, but we hear anecdotally from many authors that they're getting really useful private feedback via email, and there's a huge amount of interest on social media. Just to make it easier for authors, we have these J2B and B2J technologies that allow people with one click to submit from BioArchive directly to a journal, and an increasing number of journals are now allowing you to just click when you submit to the journal, saying, I also want to put this on BioArchive now because I want it out there. So that's great, and shows that I think that's one of the biggest illustrations that it's not a barrier to subsequent journal publication. The other thing we've been doing is integrating with conferences, and I think this is where it begins to become very interesting for this group here. So this is just an example from the Biology of Genomes meeting at Cold Spring Harbor, where all the papers that are related to talks people give at that meeting are tagged on BioArchive, and there's a channel on BioArchive for Biology of Genomes. It's not just meetings. We've done it with other groups. This, based here in New York, the Simons Foundation for Autism Research have a channel. And that works the same way with tagging. I wanted to propose the same. I know I'm running late now. So this is what I wanted to propose for GP Write, which was a GP Write channel on BioArchive. I mocked this up here. They're all papers from George Church because he's got plenty on BioArchive. I suspect that in the event it'll probably be only about 50% of papers from George Church, but this is what it would look like. And also there's people are beginning to annotate the web with a technology called Hypothesis. They are just beginning to introduce the notion of private groups. I think it would be great if GP Write considered this, so that if you went to BioArchive and you saw the GP Write papers, there were annotations from the people working on GP Write that would tell you more about those papers. I think that's a really nice idea. And just to finish, we see BioArchive as a real hub for communication on which other things can build. And I think there's a real opportunity for synthetic biology here. BioArchive doesn't purport to do the certification. That's done by journals. But I think the interesting thing about synthetic biology in particular is it affords an opportunity to think about doing certification differently. If you've decoupled the distribution of the finding from the certification, then there may not be the same pressure to make that certification happen so quickly. And maybe in synthetic biology of all fields, you might decide that sending the work out to 3 people and asking for written comments in 2 weeks isn't necessarily the way that you want to do certification. Thanks.
I'm just curious how much pushback you got from the journals. I'm a physicist, so there was a very healthy preprint culture in many branches of physics prior to archive, which way predates electronic distribution. And so the publishers were used to that. I don't know what the culture has been in the bioscience areas and whether the journals are now very worried about their revenue stream and so forth.
Yeah, so there has been some pushback. I think the difficult thing for journals is very hard to argue against this because the only real argument against it is your own commercial interest, and obviously that doesn't play very well with scientists. So some journals have said that, but they've changed, and I won't mention any names, but there are some kind of like big publishing organizations and big journals in particular that 3 years ago would not allow this and now realize that they have to. So I think the one area which is, once you get to the clinical side, I think that things are very different, and there are reasons for proceeding more cautiously there. We do that. We only have sections for clinical trials and epidemiology, and we intend to move in that direction, but there's a lot more issues on the clinical side.
I like preprints. It's great to be able to see the research as soon as it's done. And that's one of the main motivations to put things out on preprints. But one of the things that really slows down publication of results is not the time for the journals, but the requests from us, the other reviewers, for lots of extra experiments. And that's by far the longest thing that delays the research being published. And my worry I always have with preprints is you're effectively saying, this can be the version that goes out initially, and then the journals people will feel more and more empowered to ask for more experiments and add more so that the journal version becomes something extra. Do you worry about that?
I don't know. I mean,
is there any evidence that might even be happening now?
So you think that the revision requirements are going to become more severe as a consequence of this?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think it's kind of, I would argue the other way. I would say that in some ways this is good because it'll keep journals honest. I think if you put out your paper and I say that's great, and then you say, well, Cell have told me I have to do this, and then 900 people say that's utterly ridiculous, then I think it's going to push things in the other direction. I think it means that we'll think a bit differently about peer review and how we do it, and so I think it would probably do the opposite. But maybe you'd have to ask somebody from Cell or Nature about that.
Do you have any retraction issues here?
No, so that's something that I think the community still needs to decide about retractions, because so there's two things. First of all, bear in mind that when you retract something from a journal, you don't remove it entirely. You just say it's retracted. It's still there. So that's a key thing. The second thing is that a preprint on BioArchive, there's no claim being made about the authenticity of it, and they all have a little link saying this has not been peer reviewed. So
if someone had fabricated data on a preprint using the BioArchive, the university wouldn't discover that?
Oh, well, they might do, but it's not really up to BioArchive. Can't retract something they're not making any claims about. But the other thing is there is a comment section. So if you go to one of these things and there's a comment section, there's 100 people that say Figure 1B looks very much like Panel C of Figure 6. Do you know what I mean?
This is awesome. Have you got a category for negative results?
So what we have is contradictory. We have new, contradictory, and confirmatory. So I think it depends what you mean by negative results. I would say negative results is a new result, and we don't do any peer review, so we wouldn't say we're not going to post that. A lot of the time what people mean by negative results is contradictory results. So they've done something and got a different answer from someone else. And yeah, absolutely, we have that.
What I love about this is it provides an outlet for research that has actually been paid for, but which you got scooped on. And you can't actually, if you have a grant and you worked on something for 6 months and somebody scoops you, then you don't get published, and people just drop that research and those findings completely. They never see the light of day. Whereas your journal,
especially if your result is different. I mean, somebody mentioned the tardigrade earlier. I don't know if everybody saw the big PNAS paper about massive horizontal transfer going on, and then 2 weeks later on BioArchive, somebody put up a paper and said no.
right? So negative data is just another category of things that never see the light of day.
Yeah. So no, I mean that's hopefully that we should be able to address that. Thanks.